So in essence, she may be having other men's children. Well, Oregon law, like the rest of the 50 states, presumes that those children are yours. That's the convenience of the marriage license and the marriage certificate. You gentlemen, you husbands, are presumed to be the fathers. And we get questions on that quite a bit, and I try to come up with answers. Of course, this grew out of common law years ago, centuries ago, and it's very much like barnyard law, where if you are a farmer or a rancher and you have cattle, and we'll call your cattle the cows, and down the road, maybe a mile or so, your neighbor farmer or rancher has bulls, and his bulls get out into open pasture between you, and your cows get out into the same open pasture. At the end of the day, when your cows come home, and some of them may be with calf, who do you think owns the calf? It's the man who owns the cow, not the man who owns the bull. So marriage has taken a kind of a twist and turn from barnyard logic. It's, if it's your wife, you own the byproduct of everything that comes out. And that's the way it works. Now, a number of fathers have begun to challenge that presumption in law, the presumption that the husband of the woman who has a child is indeed the father. Now, these go directly to the paternity issues, and I'm told we have a call on the line. Bear with me, caller. We will get to you. I'm being signaled all over the place. I want you to watch a story about Jerry Miskovich out of Philadelphia, who challenged the system that says that he is the father of the children of this woman that he divorced. Roll tape on Jerry Miskovich, Philadelphia.
Proud to have a child carrying my name.
Jerry Miskovich figures he was as proud of Papa as there ever was that day late in December 1987. At 25, he says he was ready to take on the responsibilities of fatherhood, even if his wife's unplanned pregnancy, just 8 months after their wedding, had come as a surprise.
I was shocked because we had been practicing safe sex and birth control. And I asked her, how could this happen? She said, well, we must have had an accident.
And as accidents sometimes happen, so too do divorces. Just 3 years after their storybook wedding, Jerry says he returned home from work one day to an empty house. He says his wife Liz had taken his son and everything else. He says all that was left were a few sticks of furniture and a note saying the marriage was over.
I never knew that it was as bad as it was, and that she would just do something so drastic without talking to me, working things out.
Still, Jerry says the divorced couple worked at sharing custody of the little boy with the laughing brown eyes. 2 years passed, and Jerry had a new fiancée, Marianne Uveri. The solidly middle-class couple even considered asking Liz for custody. As it was, $300 of his monthly earnings as a computer programmer went to Liz for child support.
What was the custody agreement?
It was normal visitation every other weekend, special days, holidays and birthdays.
What kinds of stuff did you do?
Just normal family things, from playing board games to going to the park to going to zoos or amusement areas, things like that.
And that's the way it was for 2 years. But it all suddenly changed when Marianne discovered a secret in the little boy's eyes. A secret that would change lives, challenge 400 years of common law, and raise questions about the very meaning of fatherhood.
I was over at Jerry's townhouse when his ex-wife came over to bring the child over for a weekend visitation, and there's these crystal blue eyes looking at me, and I'm looking back at them, and yet I'm holding a child that has brown eyes, and it just hit me.
Though it had been 15 years since Marianne had been in nursing school, an old lesson from a genetics class came barreling back. In this old textbook, she found it. Mendel's Law, a fundamental law of nature that states the gene for brown eyes is always dominant over the gene that causes blue eyes. Put simply, two blue-eyed parents cannot produce a brown-eyed child. Both Jerry and his ex-wife were blue-eyed.
When Jerry asked me what was wrong, I said, we got to sit down and talk. And I had asked him if he knew if Liz ever had any affairs while they were married. And he said no, that she didn't. And that to me just made it even harder because I was not even going to just tell him that the child wasn't his, but also about the affairs.
It was a double blow. One, that child is not your child. And two, this means that your wife was sleeping with somebody else.
That's right. I thought I was the only one ever with her.
So on the next weekend visit, father and son went for an outing, but not to the park or the zoo. This time, Jerry told his little boy they were going to see the doctor. In fact, father and son went to the Red Cross, where they both had blood drawn for a DNA test.
Sure enough, the test result was that I was 100% excluded. There's no possibility. There's no way I could have been his father.
What would you do in the same situation? If you discovered your son wasn't yours, would you not tell him at all? Tell him now, or wait till he's an adult?
That's an interesting story, you've got to admit. The story that the Wall Street Journal wrote that gave birth to the story that you saw on the air just now included a father from Portland, too, Steve Albrecht. And the father from Portland was excluded. He had got a special order. He was excluded from being the father. He had a non-paternity order. In the midst of the divorce, his ex had gone on to the welfare system and run up a welfare tab. At the same time, his ex had agreed to do a DNA paternity test. And the results came back that the husband was not the father, and he asked the court, right here in Portland, Multnomah County, Judge Paula Kirshner, to issue a non-paternity order. And what had happened in this case, apparently, the two of them, the mother and the father here, Steve and his ex-wife, had agreed to a non-paternity order, and the guy that is responsible for this child is probably being sought after now for the repayment of welfare as she went on the system. Now, as a suggestion to many of you guys going through divorce, you may want to get a DNA test right up front before the divorce is finalized. If the DNA test shows that you are not the father, then you may want to get a non-paternity order to protect yourself. Now, the states have a big problem here. On the one hand, DNA tests are used as evidence to prove that you're the father in a non-married situation. The state uses DNA tests every day where you have a man and a woman having a child and they're not married. So paternity tests and DNA tests are welcome as evidence to prove you are the father. What the state's dilemma is now in all 50 states is that if you are married, you are not asked for those DNA tests, and you do not have the opportunity to verify paternity, and the state is not interested in whether you are the biological father or not, because the state just wants you to assume that you're the father and pay up, you dummies, because the state wants to call you a bunch of deadbeat dads. So there is a real dilemma out there, and they're working on trying to correct it. I would suggest that here's an opportunity for those of you who consider yourselves activists, is to go to your legislature when the time comes. Ask that there be a law passed that allows an opportunity for a married man, just like a divorced man, to verify paternity. Right now, there is no such opportunity. You have to create it yourself. And there are several ways of doing a DNA test. One of them is the cotton swab in the mouth. That's called a buccal swab, just like your belt buckle, buccal swab. There are DNA testing laboratories all over the place, and if you're not near one, you can even have a local lab take the sample and they'll mail it, and you can do this by mail. Tests vary anywhere from $400 to $500 or $600, and you can pick and choose what lab you want to do this. The Red Cross does them, and OHSU does tests also, and there are private labs, again, all around the country. I've talked with several of them, one in Seattle, one in North Carolina, but they're out there. And perhaps if you need to get a DNA paternity test to verify that you are or are not the father, it might be worth your while. It might save you a lot of child support money and headaches later on. I understand there's been a caller patiently waiting. Hello, caller. Welcome to the DADS Television Network.
Yes, good evening. My name is DW.
Yes?
I've been listening to everything you were saying, sir, and the big thing to me, I have a son about 26 years old, and he is always having to bounce off the modern-day woman in regards to if he is considerate and does the old rules, then he's backward. And if he's not considerate, then he has no manners. And I'm looking at a 26-year-old who's trying to develop a relationship with women, and it's like a double standard. No matter which way he turns, he's nailed.
So your question is what?
Well, my question is, we don't have, we're losing our standard in regards to conduct between men and women, just like you're saying, whether it's a man or a woman in regards to the care of the children, it should not matter. I agree with that. It's difficult for the young people today, and I don't have an answer for that one.
Well, I can understand your dilemma. I don't know that I would have an answer that would pass muster with some of these youngsters. Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't pay any attention to this women's lib crap at all. I don't even try to be fair and equal. I'm a gentleman well into my 50s, and I've ignored all that. But in his, see, I'm more than twice his age, and in his time, he's been confused by the media and such programs as Phil Donahue and the Oprah Winfrey's, and none of that stuff is going to last long, but it may last over his lifetime. My suggestion to him would be to instill in your son your values, or the values of your father, and tell him to ignore all that feminist crap of equality. It doesn't work for him anyway. He has to set up his own values. He doesn't have to jump to the dictates of something that you can't make sense of.
Well, I figure good manners are always in place.
Good manners are fine, but you don't have to be stepped on and walked on by the feminist movement. It doesn't make sense. There's nothing about it that makes sense. Even women don't particularly care for what this feminist movement has brought to the forefront of American society. Most of it is a crock, okay?
Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Good evening.
We've got some additional footage here. Going to try to get in. Oh, we can't do that. We're going to have to... Look, we're at the end of the program. We're going to be back in 2 weeks on this station at this time live. For the east side of Portland, you can see us on Friday, cable channel 33 at 8 p.m., and watch for our reruns. There are going to be a lot of them. And with that, let's roll the tape and blow us out here. See you in about, on the east side of Portland, in about 3 or 4 days. Okay, thank you very much for watching the DADS Television Network. There's a number there, that's for Dana Christian, and I wonder if we can flash the DADS number on the line too. Dana's in Montana, 406-222-5812, and DADS, if you want to call or write. Oh, by the way, I didn't give out the P.O. Box. We got that P.O. Box up there somewhere. Maybe we ought to flash that on the screen. DADS at P.O. Box 8525, Portland, Oregon, 97207.